Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie. I'm eager to dive into tonight's topic around grace and do we extend grace to ourselves? This is a conversation that I did not really ever have growing up. In fact, I really sought to do the opposite of extending grace, and it was really extending pressure for I didn't even mean to perform, but that's what it was looking back in hindsight, where I knew that if I behaved a certain way, then I would achieve certain outcomes. I think when we're little, we're looking for black and white if then patterns. So if X happens, then Y will be the outcome. And then it becomes predictable, it becomes reliable. And part of actually what is dissonance, and so often when you hear that term cognitive dissonance, it's under a very negative light, because what that means is that there's an inconsistency, there's a lack of congruence between what you are expecting to be the outcome against, let's say there's a disconnect between what is being told and then what is being experienced. And that's not always the case. There can be a dissonance in other ways, but primarily a cognitive dissonance is that, man, what I'm seeing is not at all what I'm being told, or what I'm experiencing is not at all lining up with what somebody said. So there's a disconnect in reality. And so as children, we're looking for if then patterns all around us. And in seventh grade, I took a logic class and it was all about looking for if then patterns. And so it becomes a very black and white approach to the world. And in so doing, we learn that certain behaviors yield certain results as children. And then we end up becoming patterned, so to say, based on these behaviors that we kind of fall into. And some of us do it as children because of survival, and it was a really terrible outcome if we didn't behave accordingly. Some of us just learned that that's kind of the game. If I want to earn love, that this is what I have to do. And I think for so many of us, it's actually interesting because it wasn't super negative if we didn't do what we were supposed to do, but it wasn't the ideal. It wasn't what could be a more I guess you could say optimal outcome. So we learn to play this game. We test the waters, we watch the reaction, and then we adjust accordingly. And so then we learn these default ways of being and looking at the world based on these very early childhood experiences. And as a result, we find ourselves patterning as adults these behaviors that we learned as children simply by this if then logic. If I do X, then Y is the outcome. And so in order to live in a predictable environment, we maintain these predictable behaviors to ensure that we have the predictable outcomes. And what's so damaging for children and adults alike is when the outcome is not predictable. When we do the same behavior and some days we get X and some days we get Y, and it's we don't know what's going to be the result from our behavior. Thus it breeds this instability, and it breeds a real lack of security in the world, but ultimately mostly with ourselves, where we actually end up being so dependent on other people's reactions and the way that they treat us that we start feeling insecure, that we actually feel like we can't trust ourselves because our value and our worth and our identity is tied to how they view us or how they treat us. And so then we just become so kind of disconnected from what is reality, because we end up living their experience. Their experience holds greater weight than our own. And what ends up happening is, have you guys heard the term codependent? That's a term that I became familiar with because that was something that I kind of inevitably ended up becoming. And I had no idea what that was. But when we start living off of, like, the thumb on the pulse of reality is everyone else's moods or everyone else's responses or everybody else's reaction. And then they become our weather thermometer for how am I performing? How am I doing? Am I good? Am I showing up? Am I going to be loved today? Am I going to be accepted? Well, based on everyone else's weather thermometer or thermostat, well, then I will show up according to how I'm assessing and judging their reactions. And so you end up having very hyper vigilant people me being one of them, where I would find myself just looking around the room, and a slight adjustment of behavior or even adjustment in the seat can indicate, oh, something's not right. And so, ever since I was a kid, and I think so many of us have found this to be true, ever since we were children, we have learned the art of people reading. I was talking with a client today, and we were talking about empathy. And empathy can be so dangerous because it ends up being a silo. It's like a horse with blinders on, and we end up not being able to see what's going on around us because we're so laser focused on the people that we have given permission to them over how we feel and our worth and our identity. So if someone holds the key to my identity, well, then of course I'm going to place an overemphasis on a value on their opinion and how they're doing, their well-being, that I actually might miss out completely on the landscape of everybody else, much more so even myself. And so when we look at this question, do you extend grace to yourself? Well, if we are completely measuring our behavior and our performance, and effectively our in business, there's this phrase, key performance indicator, a KPI. A KPI is what we use to assess whether a outcome is ideal against what we thought it would be. So we'll measure the success of a marketing campaign. We'll measure the success of even a salesman. Hey, are you hitting your KPIs, your key performance indicators that indicate success, that you're heading in the right direction? And if you're consistently below the mark, maybe you're not a good fit for the role. Maybe we need to move you around in a department or get rid of you completely. And so we have to have these kind of KPIs for ourselves. And we do, regardless of whether we've set them by intention, but we always are looking to those KPIs of, am I hitting them? Am I being successful? But the thing that's dangerous is when somebody else holds the keys, when someone else is holding the barometer of our own worth and our value, and we're looking desperately to them to say, did I do it? Did I do enough? And, we found this a lot with our parents, where we'll be looking for the validation from our parents or our caregivers, whoever they were. And at some point, my desire for validation came no longer from my parents, but it actually was switched to my partner for a while. It was me looking to him to be like, am I good enough? And we do this regardless of gender. We do this by way of, I've heard, actually, I was talking with a group of men the other day, and they were all mentioning how, there's actually this ideal form of self-sacrifice by which they will measure success for themselves. It's almost like, how much am I suffering? How much am I sacrificing for my family? To the degree to which I sacrifice is the degree to which I am a worthy man. And I think mothers have this too. I've heard a lot of moms just say, I completely lose myself in being a mother. So do I extend grace to myself? Well, gosh, if someone else is holding the measuring stick, how could I ever actually extend grace to myself if I have no power in my own seat? I'm going to just take a quick moment and jump over here in the chat. I'm so glad to see you, Gray Tone. Hello. Legend, hello. Good to see you. Raul, hello. Rob, Rob Mack, thanks for joining. William, hello. No one. Husafel, hello. I'm here. Blue Kodiak, I'm glad you're here. Says listening and be kind is a good start in life. Isn't that the truth? Oh, Raul, thank you. I love your comment. Tommy, hello. Good to see you. Ben, hello. David, hello. William. Christopher Adams, hello. Oh my gosh. I almost got arrested this evening. Oh, Christopher, I totally will pray. Are you okay? My gosh, I hope you're all right. Honestly, that's so disconcerting. I can only imagine. Oh gosh, I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you. And if you feel comfortable sharing what happened, I'd love to be praying for you. Jeeper, Just looking at your comment. Thunder K, hello. Israel, hello. Um, it's interesting, y'all. I think that this question, do you extend grace for yourself, is so important for us to consider, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it could be the very thing that shows us, am I actually in the driver's seat of my life? Because if I cannot extend myself grace, what that could mean, it doesn't mean that it is 100%, but what it could mean is that somebody else is the one to whom we've become subservient, where they hold the power that dictates whether we're successful in life, and it could be our spouse. A lot of times, I've hosted a number of knowing retreats, and I've talked to a lot of couples, and I've just seen that our partner can be the one that holds the gavel over, are we worthy? Are we enough? And they never asked for that a lot of the times. And frankly, I think that a lot of arguments can come as a result of that. It's like misappropriated power. We're handing over this, or we're putting somebody on a pedestal. We're handing over the gavel and saying, hey, here, judge me. Am I worthy? Am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Am I performing enough? Am I loving well enough? And it's just so much. We're giving so much power over to someone who has never asked for it. And so perhaps the most loving and gracious thing we can do to our children, to our spouses, to our families, is to actually take that power back and gain the belief that we are loved and that we are worthy. So really, this whole concept of love yourself, and I say that in air quotes, because I actually think it's been pretty distorted by culture recently. But maybe this whole concept of love yourself actually means take responsibility for your life, and in so doing, come to see your own value for yourself, so that you're no longer outsourcing your value. You're no longer looking to the right and to the left and asking other people to be the ones that deem you worthy, but instead you can hold your head high with confidence. And now we go into relationships looking to love and serve and give, because we're giving from an overflow rather than from a place of lack. So rather than everybody showing up to the table needing validation from each other, at least one of us can come to the table and say, you know what, I've actually got something to give, because I have already extended myself the grace that I need to show up here today and have something to give. Michael, I love your honesty here, saying I'm not good at extending grace to myself. I had to really, really, really learn how to do that. That was not my natural byproduct. Michael, I know we kind of had similar environments. I grew up very black and white, where it was, if you're not behaving according to this set of rules, these external metrics, then you're kind of forever damned. And so there was just a very, very black and white bar of, do this thing, behave this way, have a smile on your face, be grateful, show up a certain way, model the behavior, rather than having an internal transformation that then allows for the external behavior to align with that standard. It was very, very black and white. And so because the judgment was so harsh based on those external metrics of success, let's say, we end up extending really harsh judgment to ourselves rather than experiencing what grace even means. And, I was kind of digging into that a little bit before the show. What does grace even mean? And the Greek word is karatos, and it translates to grace, favor, kindness, even thanks. And it's really interesting. It's akin to like receiving a gift. And over the last, I guess, 6 months, we've been reading through every day, for the most part, a lesson in A Course in Miracles. And it's talked a lot about receiving and the power in receiving we actually end up giving. So it's effectively, the word receive in Greek is lambano, and it's a very action-oriented word. I've always thought of like receiving as something kind of complacent, like I'm sitting on my laurels, let's say. But receiving, true receiving in the word that is the Greek for receive, it's like very action oriented. I think of it as kind of like this water wheel. What comes in has to come out. So if I'm really going to receive something, it will inevitably come out of me. If it doesn't come out of me, then have I really received it? So this concept of us receiving grace then becomes the thing that we then extend to others. So we actually cannot give that which we have not received. So if we have not received grace, we fundamentally cannot extend it to other people. And so then the question is, okay, well, am I actually able to receive it for myself? And why or why not? And I want to take a moment here. I actually want to read today's lesson in A Course in Miracles because it was all about grace and it kind of inspired this conversation. We're in the middle of a review right now where we're going back and reviewing a couple lessons. So we're reviewing lesson 169 tonight. And I just thought it was really, really, really profound. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. By grace I live. And I'm sorry for like my little horsey throat. Or froggy throat. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully I'm not getting sick. Okay. Lesson 169. By grace I live. By grace I am released. Grace is an aspect of the love of God, which is most like the state prevailing in the unity of truth. It is the world's most lofty aspiration, for it leads beyond the world entirely. It is past learning, yet the goal of learning for grace cannot come until the mind prepares itself for true acceptance. Grace becomes inevitable instantly in those who have prepared a table where it can be gently laid and willingly received. An altar clean and holy for the gift. Grace is acceptance of the love of God within a world of seeming hate and fear. By grace alone, the hate and fear are gone, for grace presents a state so opposite to everything the world contains that those whose minds are lighted by the gift of grace cannot believe the world of fear is real. Y'all, this is so powerful. This goes exactly hand in hand with what we were just talking about. Effectively, how do I actually receive grace? It says, grace becomes an inevitable instantly in those who have prepared a table where it can be gently laid and willingly received, an altar clean and holy for the gift. Grace is an acceptance of the love of God. And I actually, in this case, I'm like, okay, I actually like the word acceptance. There's a semblance of surrender there where it's like, all right, I'm just going to let it come in. You know, I had this kind of picture in my head 2 years ago. I forget why. I think I was thinking about my word for 2024. And I just had this like picture in my mind of this person on a mountaintop, like at the pinnacle of a mountain. And they're like wide open, like their hands are open, their arms are open. And this is a vivid picture, but it was like they were actually like not wearing clothes. They were just completely open and exposed. And in that complete vulnerability, they then were effectively allowing themselves to receive, to accept, to allow for the surrender of, I'm going to let down my walls. I'm going to let down my guard. I'm going to let down all these preconceived notions that have actually been the thing that kept me safe and hidden. The preconceived notions that I'm not enough. Because if I think I'm not enough, then I actually don't need to be brave in believing and hoping that I'm enough. And if I have all my guard up, well, then maybe I actually don't really need to venture and really try because, well, I can't really try. I've got all this baggage on me. And it's actually safer to stay small and obsequious than to stand big and bold and brave and receive love. Because in receiving love, it means that we're seen. And so am I brave enough to let myself be seen? And it's funny, you know, I've had in the chat here before, I've had people be like, well, you're already seen. Like, what's the purpose of kind of like positioning yourself to be seen? But the thing, the element there is that relationships are a two-way relationship every time, even with that which is divine, even with God himself. It's still a two-way relationship where I think of it kind of like a parent when the parent goes to the child and is like, did you take the cookie? And the kid's like, no. And well, the parent obviously knows that the child did that, but the openness of the child to pour out the truth, to receive love and forgiveness in return. And now it's a two-way street because there's transparency and vulnerability in both directions. It's really vulnerable to put yourself out there and be like, I love you. And so if we're experiencing the vulnerability of God himself saying, I love you, and kind of extending his hand, and we're not extending it back, well, then of course we're not going to have that kind of relationship that I think a lot of us actually do do actually want. We want unconditional love. Who doesn't want that? And so it actually requires a real semblance of bravery to believe perhaps that maybe I could be lovable, and maybe perhaps I could receive the thing in the love that I've been looking for and striving for my whole life. So this concept of how do we receive grace, prepare a table for it, an altar clean and holy for the gift. And I actually think that clean and holy for the gift, and this is for those of you who are just joining, we're reading from A Course in Miracles. I actually think that that's a really, really important piece. Clean and holy for the gift. The presence of God is a gift. It really, really is. But it's a gift that any of us can receive. And so, am I actually being a place that is of welcome? There's this concept of being a fragrant offering. If I have guests coming to my house, I clean my house and I light candles and I make it look pretty and I set pretty napkins out and, I make a whole setup for them. So if we're not doing something kind of like that, I think for God, if we want that vulnerability, there's something vulnerable in taking the moment to tidy things up. Jordan Peterson, and I know that there's a lot of not modern day Peterson, but 10 years ago Peterson. There's something around just cleaning your room. If you don't know what to do next, just clean your room. And so if we want to grow and advance in our life, well, we can start by kind of tidying up our inner world and taking stock of what are my thoughts? What do I consume? What do I watch? It was so interesting. It was so cool. I was in for anyone who's done EOS, which is the Entrepreneur's Operating System. We're doing that right now for one of my clients. And we were in a L10 meeting today with all the executive team. And this guy, this brilliant young man, I don't know how old he is. He's got to be in his 20s. I don't think he's much older. He has recently been in recovery. And he's like, I gave up playing video games and this is what I built this weekend. And he built this amazing vibe coded application to help capture all of the data. And I was just nerding out hardcore when I was looking at it. I was like, oh my gosh. But it was just, that's a daring thing, to just stop playing video games, to clean out your mind, to clean out the distractions, to stop consuming so we can become a creator. And maybe in becoming a creator, we actually can create a semblance of likeness of what we've received from our creator. So the grace that we've received, we then can create it and fabricate it to create something like what we received and then go and extend it and give it away. And maybe even we create something completely new, something unlike anything anyone has ever experienced, because we are giving ourselves space to exist in this kind of sacred sanctuary, honestly, of our inner world. Our inner world, if we're doing it the right way, our inner world is a place of respite. It's a place of safety. It's a place of peace where we can kind of go inward and create and create something truly miraculous and truly made of love. I always can tell when I'm out of alignment, when I'm like, oh man, I need to go and kind of go inward. I need to go back. I need to go back to the source. And the source is that table. I'm going to read it one more time because this is just so incredibly beautiful. Grace becomes inevitable instantly in those who have prepared a table where it can be gently laid and willingly received, an altar clean and holy for the gift. Grace is acceptance of the love of God within a world of seeming hate and fear. So are we creating that table? Are we cleaning the altar? And sometimes, this is the thing that's so cool about grace, is that sometimes the cleaning is actually the pouring out. It's we think of the lymphatic system in our body and the way that it processes and eliminates waste and toxins. And then the glymphatic system is actually the thing that eliminates waste and toxins in our brain. We don't have anything for our soul. We have all these emotions from decades upon decades upon decades. And so the process of actually releasing all of that emotionally can be part of the cleaning process. It doesn't mean that we're perfect, but what it means is that we're being actually truthful. We're engaging with the truth. We're looking in the mirror and we're allowing ourselves to go to the depths and then receiving grace as a result of that. Just jumping here in the chat. Luke, thanks for joining. Um, Raul, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Um, Beyond the illusion, thank you. Thank you so much. Cyrus, thank you for joining. Um, William, oh, thank you, William. I appreciate the encouragement to look here. I'm glad to be here in the chat. Um, at Mac, hello. I'm just Johnny. Good to see you. Ciao, hello, Luke. Big Kong, hello. King Charles, he says, "You're up so late." I know, I need to go to bed. Oh my gosh. Um, American Rule. Paul 9290, hello. Or App Mac. Aaron, hello. Good to see you. I love this. Luke says Christianity is not a religion, but a relationship between humans who are of the natural world and certain a spirit who is in the supernatural, the Holy Spirit. What an interesting perspective. I love that. All right, y'all, thank you so much for joining tonight. I'm so grateful for your time. I know time is one of the most precious things we have in life. So thank you so much for joining. I will be back on tomorrow. I'm committed to getting back into a rhythm. I'm about to leave and travel for the next kind of like 6 weeks. I have a week off here and there, but yeah, I'm excited to kind of get back onto a routine. So looking forward to doing that. But thank you all so much for joining. I will schedule the show for tomorrow, hopefully more time in advance than I did tonight. But I will see you tomorrow on the Knowing Show. And in the meantime,